podcast, I'm excited to welcome Min Egidio. She's the president and owner of both All Time Awards and Alpha Graphics. Min is passionate about business, building connections, and creating a meaningful impact. Let's dive into her journey. Hi Min, it's great to have you here. I'm excited to learn more about you and your journey.
I'm glad to be here.
Can you share a bit about yourself?
Where do I start? Let's start with my personal background. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Koreatown, which is my ethnicity. I am Korean. And I recently, after high school, graduated and then got an opportunity to attend UCSD, which ultimately brought me out here to San Diego. And I've been here ever since. I never really went back home. My entrepreneurial journey started about 7 years ago. And really, life happened. I wasn't really looking to buy or start a business, but life happened and I had an opportunity that I took. And here I am, 7 years later.
You said you got an opportunity. So when did you first decide that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
So my background's in finance. After UCSD, I got plugged in and I got my first job, and I worked for Samsung Logistics. And I got, in the accounting department, slowly worked there for 3 years, and then I moved over to a biotech company here in Sonoma Valley. Was there for about 2 years. During that time, I got married and had my first child. And that's really what sparked my journey. And this opportunity comes from the fact that I actually just wanted to leave work for a bit, for a couple years, and raise my daughter, stay home and be there for her. Turns out that didn't work out for me. I was not the personality to be able to stay home and watch a newborn child. And at the same time, my husband was really ingrained in the San Diego youth scene. And so he would run large events, large leagues, tournaments, clinics, all like that for youth basketball. And then the vendor that he wanted, that he used to use for trophies, wanted to retire. And he brought that home to me, asking me if I wanted to take over the operation. And I could have easily gone back to that biotech company. It was a great working environment and I had made some really good friends. But, when I say life happened, it was an opportunity for me to be in control of my hours. I could bring my daughter to work if I have to. I can close if I have to, and not really have to answer to anyone but myself. That's really what motivated me to start this journey. And the seller of that business ultimately won me over. So for me, it's been really, really successful when I take a chance on people. And that's been my ride for the past 7 years. I'm not here where I am today because I did it all myself, right? So like the first instant of the seller of that business, I just felt a deep connection, and I felt like he was gonna help me succeed, teach me everything I needed to know from the jump, and be happy to do so, So I took a chance, and it found me, and I've kind of exploded, and I've been all over the place since that first instant, but that's how it kind of happened.
Nice. So
Yeah.
what were some of the biggest obstacles you faced when scaling your business? And how did you address them?
I would definitely say saying yes to everything in the beginning was one of the biggest things that held me back from scaling. And then shortly running in second place to that is relying on people. That first hire was a big hire for me, because we always struggle. I started off very small, so we always struggle with this idea of, I don't have the money to pay somebody, right? And I don't think that this person can do it as well as me, or this person's never going to care as much as me, which are all probably true things, right? Your bank account's tight. You don't know if you should invest in somebody before the sales start coming in. But that, the groups that I surround myself with experience that people have had in the past, all tend to say the same thing. So I took a chance, and it was a tipping point of I was working too much. The goal of me when I bought that business was for me to stay home with my kid more, and that was not the case. I was never home. But I thrived and I loved everything about the business. I literally ran all the machines in the beginning on my own, and I communicated with all the customers, did all the invoicing. It was a one-man team. And the minute I decided to hire somebody is when I got this sense of like, oh, I don't have to do it on my own. And this person actually is really good. And then, which led to more challenges of, when I was doing it on my own, I didn't have to communicate effectively to other people, right? I didn't have to have a process in place because I just did it. I took care of it. When that first hire came on, it was like, okay, well, now I can't just do it blindly. I need some kind of system of communication and process so that this person can follow it. Then we perfected that. Then we hired the second person. And then it was like, oh, we have to do this, expand this a little bit more because it's not just a text message chain between me and you. Now this third person needs to also be in the loop. So that's really what ultimately kicked off growth and scaling. And it was kind of purpose driven. It was because it wasn't working that we had to implement a process and a system. Yeah.
So, what was your experience buying a business, and how is it different from starting your own?
I've had two. So over the course of 7 years, the first business was I have a trophy and awards company that I still run and operate today. And then, 2 years later, I started a boba and ice cream company on my own. So that was not an acquisition. I started that on my own. I actually had two locations, probably about 20 miles apart from each other. Those two experiences were extremely different. And let's see, the acquisition, like I said in the beginning of the trophy company, that one just kind of found me. And it was a smaller transaction. So there were no real learning lessons of, bank loans or anything. It was a cash funded. And, we had to have the seller carry a note also. So by doing and just by asking questions, we got the deal done. We carried a note for about 2 years, 24 months. Lump sum up front and then carry the rest for 24 months. And it was a successful transaction. The seller did not stay on as an employee. He was, as of the transaction date, he was gone and I opened on my own, did everything. So that was a good experience for me. It was manageable. The company size with no employees, it was like I can make any change that I want and I can do whatever it is that I need. The boba company, when I started from scratch, was a whole different game. It was, first of all, the food industry is insane. And for ice cream and waffles is what I predominantly sold, boba, it was all frozen foods and powders. And still the same amount of food safety control was the same as if I was running a full service restaurant, right? So I think I underestimated the amount of work that took. I developed everything from the menus to finding my own vendors to designing my own logo to sourcing the supplies like the cups, the straws, the lids, everything. So in my experience, and then I recently acquired a larger print and sign company last year. So in the past 7 years, I've dabbled in 4 different entrepreneurial experiences, and they were all really different from each other. But in my experience, in my preference, buying an existing business, I bought it smaller, I bought it larger in terms of scale, has definitely been the choice. I would need a lot of convincing for me to start something from scratch. Yeah.
It was easier because it was already set up and then you just had to scale it?
That's correct. There was already good bones in place. And what I'm looking for now with future acquisitions is how can I come in and make things just a little bit better, and with not much more work on my end. Right? I'm not trying, the mistake I made now, going into my first business, I had no idea what running a business was like. Turns out 2.5 years later, I realized, you know what? I didn't buy a business. I actually just bought a job for myself, right? I just bought something that I can make. Whereas if I was in the game of finding a good job, it would have been smart for me to go back to that biotech company and scale the corporate ladder. So when I realized that, the changes that I had to make sure that I separate this job that I've created and then run an industry, run a business and create an empire is drastically different. So, I'm here with you today because of the power of the EO network, and that group really changed my mentality. And I say this to people all the time, the only thing that really changed in my professional scale of how I've been able to accelerate at this pace is mindset. That's the only thing, because the opportunities are still there, the same. My work ethic has not changed. If anything, I'm probably more blocks than I was a long time ago. It's just mindset and believing that there are so many more opportunities and learning that really anything is possible, right? And working towards it and getting your priorities straight. That's really what the biggest difference is.
How did you shift your mindset to this?
First time was when I hired that first employee. That was a big deal for me. And I mean, relatively, I didn't have $150,000 to pay that first employee, right? So, it is what it is. And when the person accepted it, and I realized, like, this is what we need, right? And I was doing about, $300,000 on my own, which is in a manufacturing space with a lot of jobs that you physically have to run is a lot. And when I first hired that first employee, I was like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do this specific task anymore. This is you. And then when I got really good at it, I was like, oh, I can also keep you accountable. Now you know what you're supposed to do. Now let's talk about keeping us accountable for each of the action items that we have. And that's the idea of the KPIs and the structure and making sure that people are doing what they're accountable to do. That was probably my first mindset shift. Yes, it's going to cost me money, right? I could keep it small and I can take it all, or I can divvy it out and hire somebody that's actually better at that task than I will ever be, you know? And that was probably my biggest one. And then recently, acquisitions have come on my target recently, and that's also a mindset shift of, taking a risk, investing in that next company that can help you ultimately grow, and buy that book of business and make my good, efficiency changes and scale that way.
How do you decide when to take a risk and when to go for it?
Yeah, I wish I can tell you that there's a formula that you can follow, and if there is, I would love to hear that person tell me what that is. For me, it's just been, I don't know if this is the right way to admit this on a podcast, but for me, it's just in my gut feeling. It's how I feel about the transaction. And there's a lot of times where I don't feel good about it, no matter what the situation is. And I've backed out and I'm just like, I don't feel good about it. Obviously, there's a lot of due diligence, right? Like when you're entering into an acquisition, you're asking for everything. Show me all your financials. Show me if they have employees. This most recent acquisition, I did it last year in August. It was a high-performing print company. On top of that, it's actually a franchise called Alpha Graphics. And so there's some regulations there that I wasn't comfortable with, or I don't know how franchises work. So there's a lot of learning on that end. And then there was a team of 10, right? 10 employees. It's 10 different personalities that I didn't know 2 weeks ago. And so there was a lot of asking questions. I mean, I have a whole spreadsheet of all the things that I hit, regarding, what's your sales process? What's your training process? What's your culture? What's your HR policy? All that stuff. And so that deal took about 11 months to close for one reason or another. And at the very end, after all the 10 months, the seller took a different offer. And I remember coming back from a vacation with my family, coming back to the news like, oh, he took a different offer, we're not going to get it. And I had this like really uneasy feeling in my stomach. And I was like, this is how I know that I actually really wanted it. And then 2 weeks later, he came back because that offer fell through, and right away after that it moved fairly quickly. I don't think that there's an exact time or feeling of, is this risk the right risk? I think once you decide what your offer will be or what your commitment will be, you just got to commit to it. And then the beauty of being an entrepreneur is being able to forecast. Like, you're in it right now, but let's look at like what's going to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and a year, 3 years, 5 years, right? And then if you don't feel good about those future growths or future stance of whether you could just change it. That's the beauty of, sitting at the top, taking all that risk, yes, but the ability to actually make changes. Like, I could just be like, I don't want to do this tomorrow, and I could sell it. It's only been a year, but who cares? It's not working for me. It's not working for my lifestyle. I'm out, right? But going into any deal, knowing that you're in control is, like, the power aspect of that is incredible. And again, tying back to mindset, the fact that you have control over every move that you make is powerful, incredible.
Well, can you share a book, podcast, or resource that has significantly influenced your career?
Oh my goodness, so many. And you know what? I am so bad at remembering titles and names, but this one is my favorite, so I do know it. It's called Disciplines of Execution by Sean Covey, and it's out there. It's very popular, and I think this is like one of the biggest books and concepts that's changed my mindset or my doing. And my entire team knows it for both companies. And it's basically talks about four, main factors of creating discipline and how to play a game and how to win, basically at very high level. And it was just a book that I was able to first I listened to it like on Audible, and then I purchased it and I actually dissected it. And at that time, I was working with a business coach that was super parallel with that book, and so we really sat down and identified how we can make changes with using KPIs, the terms like lead and lag measures, and really keep my team accountable and easily see if we're actually winning or if we're just working every day, and so that changes the level of commitment and performance, really, I think.
You said right now you're handling two companies, so how do you manage that?
Tying back to the first thing, the first risk that I ever took was people. And I have two great managers, probably a third one on the way, that helps me day to day. I'm currently reading the book, Buy Your Time Back. And it just talks about, don't hire to grow the company, hire to buy your time back. And then in result of that, the company will grow. Acknowledging that, yeah, no one's going to care as much as I do about this, right? But acknowledging that there are people out there that are better at certain tasks than you are is key. And for me to delegate that, and I still work on it. I mean, one of the things that people always say is like, yeah, people take sales training courses. They take, we're in the industry of insulation for signage and stuff. So we go training, right? My guys go training and watch videos and all the time. But most people don't go to people training, right? Like they don't management training. A lot of the managers sitting out there really don't have any training of how to run and connect with their team. And that's one of the areas that I focus on a lot. I've been trying to be really intentional about the support of, one person running a team of people, because, my team is my management team, and then their team is on their floor, and they're just an extension of how you would operate, and so that's how I do it. I mean, I check in. I spend most of my time with the new company here located in San Marcos, but I check in daily with my team in Kearney Mesa. And if they know exactly the platforms they could reach me, and if I'm out of office, they know, and if it's urgent, they'll call. But we're still kind of working out like the level of communication on if there is an issue, it should go to this person first, and then this person, and then this person. And then if it can wait, it should be discussed on a weekly meeting type platform. So I try every day to be successful at it, and I rely heavily on my people. Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, how have you grown and what valuable lessons have you learned along the way?
So many things. I feel like in the last 7 years, I mean, I've been in school for what, I guess 12 years, right? You start kindergarten at 5 and you graduated for 18, 19, or 22 at college. I have learned so much more in the past 7 years than I've done all throughout my educational lifespan. And honestly, I've learned it by doing, and made a lot of mistakes by doing, but then we fix it and we adjust and we correct. And then I've learned so much by other peers that share what they've learned. And I was just listening to somebody the other day, like, you can read a book in 2 days and gain the wisdom of someone who's done it for 40 years, and like the level of learning that you can, whether it's relevant to your business or not, that you can absorb if you're just open and listen and surround yourself with the right people has been exponential for me in my growth. And it's just really intriguing because the people I do surround myself with are in different industries. It's totally different. Nobody that I know is in the same exact print industry, right? Other than my alphographics peers, like they're all owners and they deal with the same exact things. But, and you'll be surprised that the deals, I was in a meeting yesterday with the mergers and acquisition cohort, and the level of deals are different, but the problems and the negotiating skills, the investors, the money, that how are you going to fund this transaction, they're all the same. And it's super amazing for me to see that and be in a room where, no matter what scale, your business is, it's very similar.
Okay, so what skills do you believe are essential for running a successful business?
So many, but being open and being open to listening to people around you, but being open to taking risk. I think that is something that's innate. My husband is an entrepreneur on his own thing. He does his own stuff on the side, but whenever I bring ideas or deals, like let's do this, the next thing, we have deep conversations around it, right? And he is definitely on the safer side. And I am like, fine, let's try it. What's the worst that can happen? We'll just pivot out of it, right? Like I said before, you have full control. It's not like I'm, going into a deal like I'm tied to forever. So being able to take that risk and really trusting in yourself, and whatever situation you're in, I think is like a really valuable skill.
How did you get that skill of that confidence in yourself? Because I know even like simple decisions, people can doubt themselves. How do you get that confidence?
I just want to start off by saying I still doubt. I still have doubt. Yeah, I mean, because nothing is safe and nothing is secure. I think for me, I don't want to say it's innate, but for me, I grew up playing a lot of sports, and this is actually a question I ask in interviews. Like, are you an athlete? Tell me about your experience with on the field, on the court, on the whatever, right? I can't speak for everybody else, but I think where it comes from is the competitiveness, the nature that I've been surrounding myself as a young adult, and I kind of grew up with a lot of chaos. My family, it was not like the normal white picket fence family, and I think I was just exposed to a lot of adversity growing up, and then coming from a immigrant Korean family that's trying to just make it. My parents sacrificed a lot. I understand that, but I think at the same time, I had to work for everything that I had. We weren't in a place where whatever I needed, I was given. So just competing always, not just in sports, but like, we can have another session about sports and how that affected my life, but like learning how to lose and then bouncing back from that and going again, showing up to practice, being a leader of a team that didn't win very much. Honestly, my teams didn't win very much, but showing up, right? Like showing up again and again. That just over time, it's just been ingrained in my body to be able to do that. And it's okay to lose, but making that same mistake over and over again was something that I made sure I didn't do, and then, like I said, there's a lot of parallel between, my experience with sports and how I run my businesses. And obviously it's not the same, but a lot of principles that kind of transfer over. So for me, I think my upbringing had to do a lot with the fact that I'm comfortable with risk. Despite the fact that I didn't have a lot of money growing up, I was not always, there wasn't an easy place for me to fall all the time, right? But, repetitive behavior, just becoming a lifestyle of, it's okay, just get back up and do it again and do it again. That kind of translates over to my entrepreneurial journey, really.
That's great. So you said it's also important to be open to listen. And I know you mentioned that being an entrepreneur, you have the power to make those decisions. So how do you always stay open to listening? I know sometimes it can feel like you're right and then other people are not.
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to compartmentalize that question in terms of how I operate my day to day. So we have managers who oversee smaller teams, and I try to keep my teams no more than 5, because I really do believe that after 5, you're not really managing. You're like, it's too much to handle for one person. So say my production manager on the floor manages 5 on his team. And, if there's an issue with something, he'll voice it to me during our weekly meetings, and I do listen. But then there comes a time where listening is great, but it really helps that I have processes in place to, I guess, judge those questions, right? Like he brings a question like, oh, is it possible for us to, let's see, uh, print this way, right? This is change. We've done it this way, this other way before, but I think this way would be better. So that's a question, a change that we want to make in our process. And I ask those questions. Like there's 4 things that we have to in terms of our quality control. Like how much time will it take? How much will it cost? What's the impact that it'll make on the team? And is this going to bring efficiency? Those are kind of like mainly 4. And if it checks all the boxes of those 4, so like a criteria that those questions can fall in, and then we kind of look at that and see, okay, this is going to help, or this is really not needed right now at this time. And then it'll fall into a different, like, unimportant list that we can circle back to maybe after, some growth, or maybe there's an opportunity down the line that we have to, to purchase that equipment or whatever it is. So yeah, being open to listening is key, but it would help you make decisions, or it has helped me make decisions if I have a baseline of questions I can filter that question through, and that's helped me bring some clarity on if it's a decision, if it's a change that we have to make right now, or if it just can kind of wait. Because, with a larger team, everybody has these great ideas, and you can't implement all of them, right? So I understand, like, you got to be open, but it's just not realistic to believe that we could honor all those changes. But if the qualifying questions were clear to the team, a lot of times they'll ask it to themselves and they won't bring it to us yet, right? Until it's the right time for us to, okay, let's talk about it. Yeah, so that's helped.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you could go back in time, is there anything you would do differently in your business journey?
Oh, I don't know if it would make this impact, but I would have explored entrepreneurship a long time ago. If I could go back in time and I knew, again, going back to my family, I was destined to be a doctor, I was destined to marry a doctor, and that's what I was going to do. That's kind of how it was growing up. Had I had known that, which is funny because my dad, ran restaurants for a long time. He's no longer with us today, but he has. And maybe that's where I get it from, all the risk, and maybe there's some biological component to it. But if I could do it differently, I would have pursued maybe a different educational background to get me to here. But I also think that I think that it happened at the right time for me. Yeah. If I could do things differently, I don't know if I would have changed anything really of what I have today. I think maybe prehistoric to when I started, it would have been nice for me to have the opportunity to, spend my college years learning about businesses so that now I have the ability to implement it and gain that much more experience. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good place to end this. Do you have any final pieces of advice or any recommended resources for someone who's reached this point in the podcast?
I would say surround yourself with the right people. The reason why we're here together today on this podcast is because you were in a group that I was in and you had access to me and the other phenomenal woman in that group. I would say it's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning. There have been plenty of times where I've walked into rooms that I was like, I don't feel like I belong here, right? I think that that's the imposter syndrome everybody deals with at any stage that they're in. I would say bring a friend or go by yourself, build that courage. It takes 5 minutes for you to break a conversation. And then all of a sudden you realize that person is just like me. That person brushes their hair and their teeth just like me every morning, And then then confidence builds over time. And I can guarantee you that if they are the right group of people, they will be happy to have you in that room, right? And just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Keep going, and build that confidence. Trust yourself and believe in yourself because you can.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And it's been wonderful talking to you today.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.